Hey guys, it's actually Saturday morning. I'm here with Mike Crawford at Freedom Church in Baltimore, and we are going to be talking today about Christ, Corona, and the church. We would have done this, or at least a version of this, live Sunday morning, but that's not going to be a thing for the next couple of weeks. So we're coming to you digitally, and a chance for you to worship with your families and to love your neighbors by staying home and seeing how all this stuff in our country plays out. But before we kind of dive into Christ, Corona, and the church, or whatever you decide to talk about, tell us a little bit. People don't know who you are. So tell why are you in Baltimore and what are you doing?
My name is Michael Crawford. I'm the State Director of Missions for the Baptist Convention, Maryland, Delaware. And we work with our most strategic partner, North American Mission Board, NAM, and the SIN Network, which we are both a part of. I work inside the network for Pastor Phil Gifford, so I'm technically his servant.
Slash boss.
Slash not boss, servant. I'm here because he told me to be here. I moved to Baltimore about 11 years ago to plant Freedom Church in Baltimore City and to make disciples and invest in the up-and-coming future generation of leaders. And so that's my passion, and love being here.
It's awesome. We're glad to have you here and love what you're doing with BCMD church planting, coaching, and being the overall guru we come to. And when our church is stuck and when I don't know what to do with you all, I call this guy up and we do some coffee or some kava and figure it out. So obviously we're doing this video because our nation is in a state of emergency. Our state's in a state of emergency. The governor has banned gatherings over 250, but it's also wise and prudent to just see how things are playing out. So a lot of churches are canceling, including ours. We're at the mercy of the school system, and so we're doing this thing digitally. So as we think through the idea of Corona, Christ, and the church, how do you think Christians should respond to this pandemic?
Yeah. Well, I think off the bat, there's two things we need to try to grapple with at the minimum. Everything is subject to exaggeration and diminishment. You've heard me say this 1,000 times. I think it's a biblical paradigm. In the garden, Satan promised an exaggeration. If you eat the fruit, you'll be like God. You're not going to be like God by eating fruit. And then he basically asserted a diminishment. In the day you eat, you won't die. So with everything in life, sin wants to distort it. It either wants to exaggerate it or diminish it. So with this pandemic, with the COVID-19, the temptations are for exaggeration. We're all going to die, sky's falling, or for diminishment. This is nothing. It's less than the flu. It's nothing. So I don't particularly like the term balance. I like the truth better.
Yeah.
Truth mitigates exaggerations and diminishments. Truth walks in a differentiated way. Truth can see the propensities towards exaggeration and diminishment and speak the truth in love and behave in love. And so I think one way, just off the bat, that Christians can say, wait a minute, we have a narrative. We have a Bible narrative. We know how we got here. Mm-hmm. We know why things like COVID-19 exist. We know what Jesus is doing right now to combat that. And we know how this story ends.
Yeah.
So we should act accordingly.
I think we forget that we live in a Genesis 3 world with a Romans 8 hope. Like a Genesis 3 world, meaning that we live in a broken world with sin and broken creation, and things are not the way God designed it, intended it. But Romans 3 teaches us that we're moving to, or Romans 8 teaches us that we're moving towards something, that God is going to restore creation and fix this. And so COVID-19 reminds us of God's great narrative that we live in a broken world, Christ is the answer, and he's going to fix it.
Yeah.
So one thing you taught me, and it's probably not original to you, but I pretended it like it's been original to me for quite some time now. But one of the things that we as Christians need to look out to is when we have $100 reactions to $10 problems,
right,
or $10 reactions to $100 problems. And I think you've already spoken, that's diminishing and it's extremes.
Right.
What would you say to the Christian who is blowing this off like it's no big deal? Kind of on the one side, this is not a thing.
Right. So I think we go to the Jesus paradigm, right? Because as Christians, he's our ultimate paradigm. We're trying to be like him. We're trying to act like him. We're trying to love like him, think like him, believe like him. Our whole life is supposed to be on the trajectory of Jesus, all about Jesus. So then we ask a simple question. What was Jesus' approach, perception, and the way he addressed people who were sick? That's a novel thought, huh?
Yeah.
So I'm dealing with a pandemic. I'm dealing with a sickness. How should I approach it? Was he detached? Was he dismissive? Oh, it's no big deal. We don't see that in Jesus.
Yeah.
We don't even see Jesus coming to people and exhorting them not to be afraid, which is very common amongst Christians. It's almost like as Christians, we feel like when the world does something, we have to do the opposite. We have to be careful of feeling like we're morally obligated to do the opposite. Now, if the world kills an innocent person, yeah, we have to decry that that's wicked. But there are a lot of things in life, if the world votes Republican, we don't have to vote Democrat. You understand what I'm saying? So I feel like what Jesus teaches us is that we don't diminish sickness of any kind, because you can't find a record of Jesus approaching sickness, thinking about sickness, saying something about sickness, or addressing it in any way where he just said, no, this is no big deal. It is a big deal because people have died and some people are probably still going to die.
Yeah.
It is a big deal because people's lives are being drastically interrupted, not only here in America, but around the world. So it's something. It may not be we're all going to die, but it's something. So we'd encourage Christians, be like Jesus, don't diminish.
So when you're on social media, don't make fun of people that are scared.
Yeah. I think that, I know I've already had some disagreement with some brothers over this because they feel like we really need to rally the troops and do that. And I'm just not convinced that Christians are predominantly afraid and that's why they're behaving the way they're behaving. I don't know that it's fear. I think there's maybe be some other things. So, people are quoting the Psalms and 2 Timothy 1:7 about God didn't give us a spirit of fear and of timidity, but a sound mind. And as we talked, it's like, but that text doesn't have anything to do with pandemics.
Nope.
That text has to do with sharing the gospel. So if we want to approach believers in a time like this and encourage them not to be afraid to share the gospel, I don't have a problem quoting 2 Timothy 1:7.
Yeah. If we are the pandemic, that applies.
Right.
If Christianity is seen as the curse that needs to be banned and blocked, that's First Timothy.
Yeah. But fears are real. I mean, I was talking to a friend of mine. He's a pastor, actually, of the church we're in right now. And he's got a mother, and she's older. And my mother died in December.
Yeah.
She was 88. If she was still alive, I'd be afraid. Fear isn't intrinsically evil. And here's another thing to think about. With the exception of the battles, how did God address fear in his people? Is the overarching disposition of God when the people of God are afraid, is it rebuke and anger and you need to repent? I don't see that. In Revelation, remember John saw Jesus and he was afraid? Did Jesus go to him and say, what are you afraid of? I didn't give you a spirit of timidity and fear. No. It says he reached out and touched him and said, don't be afraid.
That's good.
Fear not, my little children. The Father's gladly given you the kingdom. When Joseph's brothers had slandered him and done all this stuff, and then the dad died and they went to him and lied, and they were like, he's going to kill us. We'll be your servants. First thing out of Joseph's mouth was, why are you guys afraid? You know God's sovereign. You know the problem. No, he said, don't be afraid. I'm going to take care of you. So I feel like we should approach fear more compassionately, knowing that there's all different types of spectrums of fear. Fear in culture provides an open door for Christians to step in and love people instead of judging them. And even fear amongst believers is an opportunity to bear a believer's burden that they're anxious or fearful and try to introduce the peace of Christ, which surpasses all understanding.
That's good. So those that are tempted to react in this with sarcasm and blow it off and are moving through, you just help them to see compassion and help them to realize that fear is a thing and God can speak into that.
Yeah.
So how about the people that are sleeping with 2 Lysol cans and are surrounded by toilet paper and they're afraid of everything? They won't get the mail, they won't leave their house. What would you say to those kind of people?
I would say, here's the thing that we don't like sometimes. Sin is a transgression of the law. Mm-hmm. The last time I checked, 2 Lysol cans and not picking up your mail is not a violation of one of the 10 commandments.
Yep.
Now, it might put an undue burden on the mailman or woman. Yep. It might make doing relationship with said person difficult.
Yep.
But we have to be careful. Again, like, you know what I'm saying? I mean, one person homeschools, another person goes to public school. Some people put their kids in sports, some don't. Some people do this, some people don't. And we can begin to make our preferences sin. So again, the way I would see that is we're a body. And to be honest with you, there was a time in my life where that person would have annoyed me and I would have rebuked them and called them out and insinuated that they were in sin because really they weren't like me or weren't like what I thought. But I'm going to bring this up again. In the garden, Jesus took 3 friends and he said, stay with me here for a while because my soul is overwhelmed to the point of death. It's a very vulnerable moment. I don't think it would have been the time for people to be robust. You understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So all I'm saying is, hey, people react in different ways. People are going to say, well, that was different. I know, but one person can be very afraid. Somebody could be afraid to drive. Somebody can have, fears are just legitimate. So, hey, what I would say to that person is, hey, if it's not sinful, it's okay. But what I would say, as with anything, anything can lead you to a transgression of the law of God. Yeah. And so I would just invite that person where and when God calls them to trust that they might have to put down their Lysol cans at some point to prepare food. They might have to put down their Lysol cans to pick up their children, to care for them. And they might have to put down their Lysol cans in order to do the will of God. And when God calls them to do that, they should just put them down.
That's good. So there's a sense of giving people space to respond as they feel comfortable with, but realizing that sometimes that needs to be crossed over to care for those that are around us particularly. Yeah,
because one more thing is, one thing we know is this is a new reality, but there's a good chance this isn't going to be a season that lasts forever. Right. Many flus and pandemics have swept through humanity, many of them. The swine flu in 2009 killed 12,000 plus people in America, over 500,000 or 60 million people infected around. So COVID-19 most likely is going to come, wreak some havoc, and then it's going to go. Yeah. So again, someone's holding Lysol cans and really anxious. You know this season's going to pass, right? So why should I create a relational tension over something that's temporary?
That's good. When you think about the church as a whole, churches aren't gathering, we're shooting a video. Speak to just the ecclesiology of this, as well as why should churches cancel? Why should they have services? As a church responds to a corona reality, what are some ecclesiological church ideas that flow into this for you?
Well, one, I think they're completely at liberty. I think I've been reading a lot of articles on the internet, as probably a lot of people have, and I think that churches are free to gather at any time. I don't know that there is a specific time in Scripture that we're supposed to gather. I think if the government issues a statement that they would like churches not to gather, they're free to do that. I think that that's an issue of Christian liberty. Whether you gather or you don't gather, that's an issue of Christian prudence and wisdom, and every church has to make that decision. And unfortunately, in most of life, our wisdom comes from after we make a choice rather than before. Yeah. Before we make a choice, we think we're making the right choice. We're gathering, or we're not gathering. And then, ask everyone 6 months from now what they would have done. And some people would go, yeah, we would have gathered, or no, we shouldn't have gathered, or I'm not sure. Again, it is what it is. But there's a tremendous missiological opportunity for the church to step in. I've been thinking about ways, even in neighborhoods, especially amongst the elderly. We know that COVID-19 disproportionately impacts older people. And so what an opportunity for people in your own church to go grocery shopping for them, neighbors you have to just go over, knock on the door and say, hey, is there anything I can get you? Do you need anything from the store? Even people who you know right now are sick. Mm-hmm. Like, could I go shopping for you? Is there anything? What an opportunity. We see the community rallying around, the state, the local, our city governments to provide lunches. There's a lot of open holes and opportunities for the church to step in and love their neighbors themselves and to be good Samaritans in the next 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks. Yeah. A lot of opportunities. I imagine single parents, moms and dads, are going to need babysitting. People are going to come up short financially. Let's be honest. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, why do you have reserves in the bank? Why do our denominations have reserves? Yep. Why do our conventions have reserves? Is it so we can die with reserves? No. Why do churches have reserves? Why do individuals, if you do, have reserves? Maybe it's for such a time as this. Now is the time. And a lot of us, as you know, we talk about, oh, we could have an Acts 2 church. Well, guess what? We have an opportunity to be an Acts 2 church. Yep. We have an opportunity to love in extraordinary ways because the circumstances are opening opportunities to do so.
Yeah. It's interesting because I was thinking back to 9/11. Of course, I was a college student in 9/11, so kind of in a weird place. But people flocked to the church. Like that Sunday after 9/11, everyone wanted to hear a word of hope. Everyone went to the church.
Right.
But this is a different crisis because now people have the same fears, the same anxieties, or know, different layers and different kinds, but the same root of fear, root of worry, root concern for the future. But now they can't go to the church. So what you're saying is we need to find a way to go to them.
Exactly. Yeah, with the narrative that he made us. Here's what's wrong. This is what's wrong. Here's how he's fixing it, and here's how he's gonna fix it. And here's the grace and the love and the brotherhood and the family, right? And the restoration that we can provide. Send network values, right? Yep. Family, multiplication and restoration. We can apply those right now.
Yep. When you think from a global standpoint, you look at the map, you go on the CDC's website, you just see all the countries that are affected. What are some missions lessons we can learn from this? So we talked about the neighborhood, we talked about the local church. What about the global mission of God that might be informed by this?
Yeah, before I answer that question, something just appeared to me as you were talking, and that is, what an awesome opportunity, maybe like any other, for us to really have a Good Samaritan paradigm, where we have our eyes and ears open, looking for opportunities across the street, down the street, at the store, to just serve people. But you know what it tells me about the global perspective? We're connected.
Yeah. Yep.
So we can use terms like race. We believe there's only one human race. My theological position, there's one human race. We're called human beings, made in the image of God, and different ethnicities. There aren't different races. There's not different human species. Right. That's called racism. Yep. So we're one race, right? Yeah. Acts 17, one race. Different ethnicities, and what we see is we're connected. And what we see is the power of the relational paradigm, that the only thing that matters in the known universe is relationship. Whether you're talking about inanimate objects or animate beings, whether we're talking about a soteriology between us and God or the church, everything's relational. We are connected more than we like to think. And so the reality of it is we've got to live in light of that. And I was thinking this morning on a walk about how some people, even to anything, would say, I don't care. And when you say, I don't care, you think like, I don't care. Me and my world, I don't care. But if I say to you, Phil, I don't care, you realize that impacts you. And you have to live with my I don't care-ness. Yeah. And it's going to have a relational impact on you. Yep. You understand what I'm saying?
I do.
So I think missionally, what an awesome opportunity again, because we know that some nations don't have the infrastructure. They don't have the resources that some other nations do. What an awesome opportunity to, again, step in. It's amazing for us to know that there are some communities around the world, some cities around the world, where they don't have a president or a governor to declare a state of emergency and bring in all these Fortune 500 companies. They just have God, and that's all they have to cope with. But they're doing a good job.
Yeah. It blows my mind to think about the fact that we didn't even know of this word, COVID-19. Something going viral was a good thing. Everyone wanted their YouTube videos to go viral, their memes to go viral. That was a good thing. But since December to now, everybody knows this word, and it's impacted the whole globe. And just think about how the gospel has opportunity. Like, it just shows you how the message of Jesus Christ, the hope of Jesus Christ, the good news of the kingdom can go in the same way. And so there are serving opportunities, but there's message opportunities that go alongside. It's a powerful opportunity.
Yeah, I agree. I think the message of hope for the gospel is my hope in all of this. God's going to fix all this, and that he has a plan, and he's able to use these things in amazing ways that we don't understand, and that our ultimate hope is outside of us. That he's working inside of all this, and that he's going to bring about something amazing.
How do you think at the end of this, we don't know when the end's coming, so we're not going to speculate when the end of COVID-19 is going to be, but how can the church be better because of this season in a month, 2 months, 6 months, whatever it might be?
Yeah. Well, I think in some ways, certain ways, one, it can show us that we love the things that God gives us, but we need to make sure we're not worshiping those things. Our resources, our structures, our systems. Those are just things. I was telling Brother Dan Hyun, the Sin City missionary for Baltimore, it's amazing to me that the early church turned the world upside down with none of the things that we currently possess, except for pieces of revelation and the power of God and the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, it's going to teach us to rely on making disciples, relational, and God's word and prayer.
Yeah, you read the book of Acts, you're like, wow, they didn't have all the stuff and conferences, and we're like panicking because we have to cancel. God's good, He's good. And maybe another thing too that it teaches us is that what James says is right. We don't know what a day will bring forth. So we need to literally live each day as if this might be our last. On my walk this morning, I was thinking, man, that means every step I'm taking. This could be the last step I take. May it be for God's glory, and may it be for others' good.
I think, let's say we survive COVID-19 and we don't get it, or people we don't know, things dissipate. I think we forget that every single one of us that survives this will die eventually if Christ doesn't return.
Yes.
Like death and sickness and illness is an inevitable reality of our broken world. And to remember, James 4, life is a vapor, and it's short. And what we need to do is make sure we maximize our time for Christ and for the gospel, and remember where our hope is.
Yeah.
This is a good reminder.
Yeah, and I want to encourage us too to take every thought captive, because just watching the president's press conference yesterday, just pointing things out to my kids, we need to think critically. There's much been made about testing, and I think that if I were to have a fever, I don't, but if I were to develop a fever,
it's good to know.
Right, it's good to know. If I were to develop a fever, I think whether I have COVID-19 or the flu, I don't think you'd want me to be around you.
Yeah.
Because do you want the flu?
Not particularly.
Okay, so I just want to make sure everyone knows this, that people are going testing, and they're facilitating testing, but we need to be realistic. The prescription's the same. Whether you have COVID-19 or the flu, it's stay away, quarantine. It should be the same.
Yep.
Maybe it's not, but it should be.
Yep.
Because thousands of people die of the flu too.
Yep.
So it's just a way to wash your hands, be conscientious, love your neighbor. What can we learn from COVID-19? Let's be thinkers. And even though things go viral, that doesn't mean they're biblical.
Yeah.
Just because it's popular doesn't mean it's biblical. Just because there's consensus and everyone's buying in doesn't mean it's true. We got to be critical thinkers.
I think about it this way: you and I, you're training up for an Ironman race, so you're in good shape. You exercise, you can outbike me and outrun me.
Not true.
But in my mind you can. So I'm a sort of a triathlete, an injured, broken triathlete. So you and I both are on. I'm younger, but you and I both are not likely to be drastically impacted by this. Like, we're just in the spectrum of people, but it doesn't mean we don't know people that could be impacted, or that we could be carriers of being impacted.
Right.
And so part of loving our neighbors as we love ourselves, the basic command of Christ to the community, means that we take this seriously, so that we don't become. We don't inadvertently, in our arrogance, in our pride and self-sustainability, that we end up hurting others.
Yes.
So so if you have a fever, stay home.
Yes, stay home. If you in these days and times, even if you have a sniffle and you say, it's a cough, it's that, it's not going to kill you to stay home. A week or two in quarantine is not going to kill you.
So you're stuck at home for 2 weeks in quarantine. What are you going to be doing?
I'm going to look up everything Phil Gifford has ever done in his whole life. I'm going to watch every sermon, any podcasts, any trainings he's ever done. That's what I'm doing.
So for the next 13 days, what would you do? You're going to get either bored or run out of content really soon.
Maybe this is an awesome opportunity for people who are Christians to ask the Lord some fresh questions.
That's good.
And maybe it's a great, maybe, just maybe, this is an opportunity for the Lord to push pause on what we know, so that he can show us what he wants us to know.
That's awesome. Well, hey, I want to wrap this up. We're going to have a family devotion guide and some of these questions to kind of reflect on what we've been talking about. But take a few minutes with your family, just yourself, and just ask God, what do you want me to learn during this season? You're not going out to all the activities that sometimes fill our lives. So how are you going to pray more? How are you going to be in God's Word more? How are you going to love your family better during this? How are you going to love your neighborhood better than this? Thank you for being here, or for me coming to you and shooting this video and sharing your thoughts. So
great.
We'll see you guys soon.